Good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here. Haven't done a big conference talk in a while. And so when Seamus actually reached out to me to talk, I said to him, listen, I run a startup now, so my first confession on the stage is I don't do a ton of data science in my day-to-day. But one thing that I think a lot about every single day is how do we build teams at my company and then more generally in the community to do good data science. And what I want to do this morning is try to push you as an audience to think more critically about how you do this in your organization. So how many of you are hiring managers that hire data scientists? How many of you are data scientists that have had a really bad interview? Wow, so much fewer. I thought we were going to be building bridges here today. Well, that's good, because what I want to talk about today is a little bit of a history of kind of how I came to believe that the culture around hiring for data science went in the wrong direction and the opportunity that I think we have as a community to try to fix it, and then just quickly go through an example of how we think about it at Alluvium and fully allow you to steal it. But I want to start again with a kind of historical perspective. So I want to go all the way back to the dark ages, and for me, I graduated college in 2004, so that's like when history started for me. So we'll go back to that time, and at that time I was, or we'll go back maybe to about 2008 when I got to New York City as a graduate student, a PhD student. And this was the time when data science and big data were getting this kind of press treatment, right? It was the sexiest job of the 21st century. And it created a groundswell, which I think we're still feeling as a community, to go out and find someone who could do this magical work for you. And as a, not starving, I went to NYU, so they do a pretty good job of making it so you can actually at least subsistence live in New York City. But I was looking to maybe help out some folks who were looking to have some data science work. And eventually I got connected with a very, very senior executive at a big Fortune 500 media company. And his offices were beautiful. You could go into his office and he had this beautiful view of Central Park. And I realized once I sat down with him and we started talking about the work that he wanted me to do and the ideas and the things that he was reading and learning about in reading those Harvard Business Review articles, he thought he was looking at this person. He thought that I had come into his office riding a fire-breathing unicorn and I was going to solve all of the problems that he had. And so clearly that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, and kind of looking back on that moment and thinking about the early days of data science, in particular the early days of bringing data scientists into organizations where that practice was new or even the idea of data science as a discipline was new, I want to kind of define that as like the invasion of the body snatchers period, right? And I'm talking about original invasion of the body snatchers, not that 90s remake bullshit. I'm talking the real invasion of the body snatchers. Because there was a sense that I could feel, and I think it still exists even today, of this kind of hopeful paranoia that there's these people who are living among us who do these things and we don't exactly know how or why they do it. And these are three great actors in this movie, and so I had to pick the one that I liked the best from this particular movie to go on. So I'm going to call this era the sort of the Goldblum era. This is the Jeff Goldblum era of data science. I want to give a quick sort of historical tour to think about why it may have been that way, why we had this sort of invasion of the body snatchers feeling. And so we start, again, history started for me in about 2004. So we start in 2004 and we have sort of the emergence of what is the earliest, I think, sort of historical totem for big data and data science, right? Google releases the MapReduce paper. Shortly thereafter, we get the successful emergence of these technologies into the open source through Hadoop. Congratulations, Cloudera, I saw your booth outside. Worked out really well for a lot of people. And I think it began to produce this kind of engineering culture within early data science to think about, what are the kinds of problems we need to solve, and therefore what are the kinds of people that we need to be recruiting into it. A few years later, data science Venn diagram gets published. I take a lot of responsibility for the fact that this visualization, which when I published it, was really meant as a way of describing a discipline, very much got interpreted as describing a person, right? So we think now not the data science Venn diagram, we think about it as the data scientist Venn diagram. And so we ended up zeroing in on, again, this kind of unicorn-like person who could do this work. Later, thanks to the doctor, we start to get our first kind of pop culture emergence of what this work is doing. And I think there were people sitting at home watching Jeopardy, seeing Watson dominate, and they were thinking, oh, what's going to happen next? We'll have robotic arms on the wheel, winning Wheel of Fortune. I mean, there was this movement of data science and AI into the pop culture that I think also built a lot of mystique around what the work is that all of us do. And I had to take a chance to jab at my alma mater. So, in 2013, NYU is the first university to offer a master's degree in data science. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think you should always be a little suspicious when the universities want to get on the act, right? Master's programs are great ways for universities to increase revenue. And so again, we had this kind of cultural emergence within academia that, hey, there is really something here. We need to continue to create froth around that. And the final piece I'll say, which I always find to be really interesting, is that in 2015, Gartner drops big data from its hype cycle, right? Most people have probably heard of the Gartner hype cycle, which tries to follow technology trends through this kind of upward mobility of hype into the trough of disillusionment and then the plateau of use. And so getting dropped from the hype cycle is a really interesting marker because it means that it's sort of just there already. We don't need to track it. It's not hype, it's real. And so we move through this whole process, and I think what falls out of it is a kind of feeling of, okay, here's how we want to be able to find people that do it. They have to fit into this kind of cultural essence of a unicorn and an engineer and someone who can do all this stuff. But I think the post-Goldblum era is very hopeful for me. Because I think moving from the invasion of the body snatchers feeling to a different 90s sci-fi movie, the Jurassic Park moment. And because I'm a data scientist and my sort of formal mathematical training is in graph theory, I had to use this kind of Kevin Bacon thing to try to connect this point. So, Jeff Goldblum is in Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is a great movie, but inside of it are these scientists who are trying to together build this wonderful park, and of course, everything falls apart. And the character in that movie who I always connected the most with is Ellie, right? Laura Dern's character, because she's the optimistic skeptic. And the thing that I want to try to really drive home with the rest of the time that I have here is I want all of you to be optimistic skeptics when you think about how you're going to go about building your teams and the processes and the ways that you're going to do it, right? So if we think about the Goldblum period, moving forward, let's talk about the Dern period. Now we're into the Dern period. How are we going to actually get better at hiring for data scientists, building not just teams, but companies that do it? Because today, I think we still bear the scars of the Goldblum era, right? We look a little bit like his character in The Fly, and I want to go over a couple of those scars because I think folks will hopefully sort of empathize with what happens there. But I think that we can get to the Vice Admiral Hodo period of the Dern period where everyone can sort of confidently be ready to build a team not based on these kind of cultural artifacts of how data science developed and how we defined it as a discipline, to actually building a complex and sophisticated set of people and offering them the work that they want to do and the transparency in doing it. So let's just talk about the scars for a second because I think they're important just to bring up. Right? The first one that really infuriates me is the whiteboarding session, right? And one point that I want to make for everybody, and this will be true for everything that I believe in sort of building teams, is the best possible interview is the one in which you set up the interviewer for success and you learn what they learn. You do not learn what they don't know. Or I should say you learn what they know, you do not learn what they don't know. And the whiteboarding session to me is sort of that canonical example of trying to learn what someone doesn't know. So sending someone to the whiteboard to go do mathematical formulas or do pseudocode is just an exercise in asymmetry. Right? I'm going to try and figure out what you don't know, and I'm going to push the limits to see where you don't know, and ultimately you'll be set up unsuccessfully, and me as the interviewer won't know that much more about you after it than I did before it. The second one, which is also very infuriating to me, is this idea that the take-home, right, which everybody does, we think about sending people work to do at home, is simply just the entry fee for taking the interview. And what I mean by that is I have very rarely seen, in my own experience and talking to my peers, an example of take-homes where it's actually directly connected to both the work that someone would be expected to do and the interview itself, right? Take-homes tend to be these kind of ephemeral things. We throw them at candidates, we expect them to work on them, they send them back, and then we start the process. What have you learned from that? Why have you asked someone to invest time in doing that, and what have they learned about you? If you give them some code or you give them some data that's completely orthogonal to the work that they're going to be doing, they're not learning more about what the job's going to be. The final one, which is somewhat related to the first, but is a different version of it, right, is this idea that, well, we have this somewhat historical idea that I want to be able to sit next to someone and see them solve this coding problem live, right? I want to sit there and do it, and I want to do it because it sucks. And doing it makes it suck because I had to do it, and it sucked when I did it. And that idea of sort of almost hazing someone into a new job, it only strikes me as something that will create resentment, right? This is not the way that we want to bring people in to the culture of our company by making them and hazing them through some live coding process. So I think about kind of 3 general principles that I've developed over, a career of now mostly hiring folks and helping my team think about how to improve our interview process and helping my peers. And so the first one here is maybe the most important one, which is your interview is a product of your company's culture. A lot of people don't think about the fact that the interview itself is a product that you build. In some cases, maybe it's the first product that you build as a company. But all the pieces that go into it and all the things that people see about you when you give it to them are a reflection of your company's culture. So if you have some of those scars and some of those warts from the Goldblum era in your interview process, that is a reflection of your company's culture. And it could be positive as well, right? You may have many great things about your company's culture that are inside your interview, and that's something that you should cherish and try to enhance as much as possible. The second piece is the value of transparency during the interview process, right? The interview process is highly asymmetrical. Right? Someone doesn't know a lot about how your business or how your company operates, and they want to kind of come and work for you. And the sort of default position that I see a lot of my peers taking is like, guard information at all costs, right? Make it as difficult as possible as it is to know about what's going to happen in this process, how will I be evaluated, because that's our secret, right? I think that is a very bad decision because at the end of the day, again, you want the person who's going to come work for you to have confidence that the work that they're going to be doing matches the experience of the interview and the people who gave it. And this is sort of related to that. These heavily asymmetrical processes, so not just transparency up front about what's going to be asked of you, but during the process, actually allowing for the lowering of that natural asymmetry between you and a candidate so that they themselves can walk away and say, you know what, I had this interview, I talked to these folks, and I feel pretty confident that if I worked here, I would be successful. And then you as the interviewer can have the same feeling. Because what's the most costly thing, and maybe I'm biased as a startup, but I think what is the most costly thing in hiring someone? They don't work out, right? If you put a bunch of effort into trying to hire someone, and then they come to the job and somehow it just didn't go the way that you thought it did. For me, the number one reason why that happens is because there's too much asymmetry in the information that goes through the process. So in the sort of second half or the last bit of what I want to talk about here today is just to show you how we do it at Alluvium. I'll just walk you right through our playbook. And this is not an advertisement for the company. All of you are gainfully employed, I think. But it's just to give you a sense of kind of how we've thought about this process for us, and you guys are welcome to steal it, critique it. I look forward to hearing from you. And the first thing that we do, or we have, is the pre-interview process. And the first thing that we think a lot about is actually writing a specific job requirement. Now this sounds totally like, no duh, but I have found that if I ask someone, okay, you want to hire a data scientist, great. And I say, write down what they're going to do. Like, what is the stuff that they're going to do? And if if the head of our data science at Alluvium can't do that, or a team of us can't sit down and just figure out what it is that this person's going to do, why are you hiring them? Right? If you can't do that most basic thing, you don't need to hire somebody. So write the job spec down. Now we do a take home, And so the second thing that we think a lot about is building a good take-home. And that means not just going out online and downloading some publicly available data set or using the IRIS classification data set, actually going and building something that is a direct reflection of the work that you're going to do. So we've actually gone through lots of iterations of this, and I'll be the first to tell you that the first few were not very good. But now we've gotten to a place where we hire for folks who have to have some experience working with streaming data. So we've actually built a streaming service as part of our take-home to work on data that we've actually worked with. This is data from a windmill, right? This is something that's unique to us, but if you think about it in the context of your work, what is a kind of data problem that this person might actually be working on using the tools that they would actually be working with on the job? So then these things need to be cycled together, right? They need to be directly connected. Then the phone screen. We do a phone screen. I know not everybody does one, but our approach with the phone screen is very specific. Again, my goal is to always set up the interviewer for success. So we want to mostly answer those candidates' questions, and the evaluation piece that either the data scientist or the engineer on the other line is doing is trying to answer one question. Will this person be able to successfully complete the take-home? Because if we don't think that they're going to be able to successfully complete the take-home, then we can screen them. We don't need to continue with the process, so we want to be able to answer the question, will this person be successful in the next stage? Then we send the take-home. The one thing that I'll say about the take-home that is not unique to us, but if you don't do it, I would highly recommend it, is package that take-home in the tools that you use. So for us, we use GitHub, probably like everybody else out here. And so the take-home is just a repo that you as a candidate make a pull request to. That is your submission, and it's as simple as that. We want to see how you would fit into working on our team when you showed up on day one. And then we review the take-home, right? They send it to us, we review it. The important thing that we do for the candidate, I think, is we try to provide guardrails for them. So this is stuff that we've learned over the course of doing this, but like setting a time limit. We say do not work more than 5 hours on this. If you can't, we do not expect you to necessarily be able to answer every single question or do all the work, so only spend 5 hours on it. And we say, we're only gonna let you work on it for a week. Now the reason that we do that is not so much that we wanna limit people in their availability, it's more to do with when they're available to do it. So if we have a phone screen and we say, okay, we wanna send you the take-home, we ask someone, when's a good time to send this to you? Because we know that people have full-time jobs, they probably have, some of them have families, and they may be actively interviewing in other places. So the worst thing that you can do is kind of pile onto someone and not get a good read back from them of what they're doing. Now the interview. What's really important about the way that we think about doing the interview is that it is a threaded line from start to finish. And what I mean by that is every piece of the interview should be connected as if you were doing work for real for us. And so going back to the take-home, the work that you do on the take-home is the first thing that we talk about when you show up for your interview, right? Your first meeting is a code review, just like it would be if you were submitting a PR as an employee at our company. So the first thing we do, we sit down and we do a paired code review with you. Basic, for data science, we understand, why did you choose this method? What was your reasoning behind this? What alternatives could you have used? Is this the most efficient way of doing it? And throughout that process, the interviewer is trying to zero in on what parts of this submission that our candidate gave could we think about building into a larger production-ready approach to this problem. Because that's what leads right into immediately the next interview, which we call project planning. Because one of the things that's really important to us is that an individual coming into the company can take ownership of a particular project. So we want to be able to have that person think about, okay, this take-home was kind of a toy example, but it's actually a real problem that we think about a lot at Illuvium. Now let's move to the next phase, which is, okay, you've built this, let's think about how would we build it into a larger project? What are the resources that you might need? What other kinds of engineers, what other kinds of design sources would you need? And actually sit through a kind of half-hour conversation where we build out what looks like a very high-level project plan. The third interview is what I think most folks would think of as a true technical interview, which is what we call project discovery, right? So now that we have this outline of what this project looks like, let's do something like a pre-mortem on it. Let's think, what are the risks involved? What are the tools that you think you're going to need to use? What are the engineering resources that you would actually have to use to implement this? And what are the costs, either dollar costs or internal resource costs? And actually dig in really deep to try to draw out from a candidate what their technical competency would be if they actually had to think about building this in production, what their experiences would be doing that. And at the end of that interview, we just have a really good sense kind of how this person thinks through a problem, mostly from start to, or from true start to about to actually kick this off as a project. So I did say that the whole thing is linear. I will say that there is a little bit of a change at the end, so that's kind of the formal engineering part or the data science part of the interview. The last interview that we have is really fully on our values. As I said, your interview is a product of your company's values. So we have a simple process. Again, I just put it up here as a way of maybe thinking about how other folks do it. We have 5 values as a company that are stated and we talk about and we try to insert them into all of our work. And so for a new candidate, we just say, all right, here are our 5 values. Rank order them from most important to least important to you. And there's no wrong answer, but it's a way of kind of getting to a conversation around how this person thinks and what's important to them in their work. And then the post-interview, right? That's that becomes one of the most important hinges on whether you're going to actually successfully bring on a new candidate. And so this typically goes kind of one of 3 ways. There's a consensus hire. We inform the candidate. We'll get to it in a second, what that looks like. There's a consensus no hire. This is a problem though, because there's a consensus no hire, that means one other part of that system has not worked properly. So one of the things that we do really at every stage, and I'll only mention it here because it's maybe the most costly moment for it to happen, is that if we've gone through the process of bringing somebody in, had engineers who might otherwise be doing work, do an interview, and we get to a point where there's a consensus no, clearly we missed something. And so at every stage, I think, if you have someone fall out of your funnel and you didn't expect that, you need to go back and think about, well, what were the pieces that you missed? Sometimes we need a little more information. So we have a pretty strict guideline around this. If we're in a bit of an undecided piece, or there's one person who's really kind of putting their foot down and saying, you know what, I just feel like we ran out of time on this one specific thing. I really want to know her thinking around this specific topic. We'll ask the candidate, can we just jump on another 30, 45-minute call, or if they're local, bring them back to the office? But we tell them that ahead of time. So again, getting back to that transparency piece, we say, listen, this is how our interview works. And at the end of the interview, it's a decision tree that really only has these 3 nodes. And there is a chance that you'll end up on a node where you might have to come back and do another one. Just so you know, that's how it works. And we've never had anyone say they didn't want to do it, but it's important to us that they have that level of transparency. And then from there, we make the decision, right? We're not going to ask them to keep coming back. We either go to consensus hire or consensus no hire after that. So then there's the epilogue, right? As I said, if we get out of this without a hire, we need to think about what we did wrong, what we can learn. And then the last thing I'll say on the interview is actually closing the candidate, right? Which is sometimes really hard because good people have lots of offers. And so beyond the kind of economic levers that you have as an employer to try to get high quality people, we again find that transparency works tremendously in our favor. So what we do with every offer that we have is we sort of attach to it on a small, medium, and large set of tasks that we want this person to work on as soon as they get here, right? Remember going all the way back to the beginning where I said if you can't write down the things that you want a person to work on, if you're hiring, why are you hiring them? So if you're hiring someone and you know that you want to bring them on and you can't write down the first project that they're going to work on when they get there, and then maybe the first larger thing that they're going to contribute in their first month, and then with all the caveats included, here's a project that I think you could contribute to over the course of your first quarter. And this is the work that you're going to do for us when you get here. If you can't do that, again, why are you hiring the person? So with the assumption that you can, giving that information to a candidate and opening up the transparency around what they're going to be do makes it much easier for them to say yes if it's work that they want to do. Right? If you're competing with another employer who might come on over the top with a better economic offer, but you've actually told someone, here's some really great work that you're going to do and you're going to love it, that gives you a huge advantage. So, go forth in the DERN era, take these ideas, challenge how you've actually done your interviewing and your recruiting, and best of luck. I look forward to talking to everybody at the conference. Thanks very much.